Welcome to Family Focus. I'm Joyce Johnson, President and CEO of Johnson & Olson Communications. Today we are talking about the paranormal, and boy, is this an interesting subject. We were talking just before the show even started, and there's many, many stories to tell. My guests today, all from the Munroe Falls Paranormal Society, are here to share their stories and their investigations. And with me is Eric Haney, Scott Wells, and Robin Vaughn. Welcome all of you to our program today.
Thanks. We're happy to be here.
Let's first of all start with Eric, because you are actually the founder of the organization.
Yes.
Or how did all of this start for you?
Well, I founded the organization in 2004 based on a lot of prior experiences. I started investigating the paranormal back in the early to mid 80s, and I was always, excuse me, I was always interested in the paranormal, and what really got me into it was an investigation I did in Bracknell, Ohio. It was an old mansion, and I'd heard some stories about it, and I figured, you know, I'm going to take up a camera and a recorder and stuff. Back at that time, they weren't as advanced as they are now, and I want to go and see what I can come up with. And after several visits to this place, I had an experience that I'll never forget. I actually was probably sometime around 6 or 6:30 in the evening, wrapping up a good day of investigating at this place. I came around the corner. Another friend of mine that was with me had just exited the house, and I turned the corner down a hallway, and standing 15 to 20 foot or so down the hallway was a dark shadow figure. And I stood face to face with it for what seemed like a half hour, but it was more like probably 30 seconds. I was able to get a very good look at it, and I knew it was, it was an apparition of some sort. And ever since then, I've been trying to find answers and trying to explain what I saw. So as time went on, and I was able to, to afford it and to, put together the resources, I started a group in 2004 with the objective to do this professionally and base it in science, in not just speculation and not just personal experience, but to try to find answers in evidence that we could show the public or show the world, and also share with other paranormal societies and the scientific community.
And Scott, what brought you into being an investigator? How did it start for you?
Well, again, it's kind of a lifelong interest. There was a time when growing up, I encountered an apparition.
How old were you?
I want to say 10 or 11, perhaps, maybe 12. I happened to be in our house. I saw the figure of a woman standing in my room. She was wearing clothes from around 1910, 1912 at the time. She had the kind of Gibson girl hair and all that, and she just stood kind of motionless in my room for a few seconds and then vanished in front of my eyes. Later on, my sister informed me that she'd seen things in the house as well, and then more recently, actually, my nephew saw something in exactly the same location I did. So there's always sort of something hanging around, I would say. And from that time, I just started reading, finding out as much as I could about these things. Started investigating kind of things on my own as I could, and eventually hooked up with Eric here. Last year, or the year before, I believe it was, and
Have never
started
stopped.
investigating with them. No, never stopped.
Right. It's always interesting, because it's usually an experience that draws you and that separates you from just reading about it to actually being an investigator. Robin, do you have a similar story? Was that how you began also?
Lifelong, probably around 10 or 11. You'd hear things you couldn't explain, or it mainly happened after my mom died. When I was 14, certain things would go on.
Like what? What was going on?
Okay, she had gangrene, the start of gangrene, so she couldn't walk up the stairs, and she's really bad diabetic. My dad would leave at night, and I'd be left all alone, and I would hear the bath water running and just stuff going on downstairs, to where I would lock, putting knives in my door to kind of make me feel a little bit safer, because I couldn't explain it.
Yeah.
But all through college, and there was always little things that happened.
Do you think it was your mother doing this stuff?
Oh, well, I don't know. I didn't want to go down there at 14 and find out.
Now you walk in the house, no problem.
Well, yeah, I know a lot better now.
Yes.
It's just the little girl things.
Well, let's talk about some of the interesting cases that each of you have been involved with, and there are so many. But let's start with the one that really got to you. I mean, I think we all have one. There might be one experience when you're going in and doing an investigation that really takes it home for you. Let's start with you, Eric.
Okay, well, recently I would have to say that was the Massillon, Ohio case that we had. We were contacted by a family that was experiencing a multitude of problems. They were seeing shadow figures, they were hearing voices, footsteps, sounds of such as furniture moving. Down in the cellar area, the whole family was afraid to go down there because they had seen a shadow pacing back and forth in the far side of the cellar. When we'd be down there for various things, whether it be laundry or whatever, they really just wanted to get out of there quickly because they just felt it, they seen it. There was all kinds of other things that were occurring, objects that would move, that would, just tend to be there, then they wouldn't, then they'd be somewhere else. So we took the case, and we went in there, and the first night we were there, we had a multitude of things happen to us. We had objects thrown at us in the living room. We had picked up footsteps. We had picked up some very, very good EVPs. And I'll tell you the one scenario which was very interesting. We had interaction with some of our equipment. We had a flashlight, and the videos are on our website for any of your viewers that want to see this. We had set flashlights on the floor and modified them to be touch sensitive, and it makes it easier for a spirit or an entity to interact with us. And we had for a good 2 hours straight. A couple of the investigators were able to get that thing to turn on and off by cue, and we videotaped the whole thing. So we took segments out of we thought were the more interesting parts, and we posted that on our website. We had also a very interesting experience the second time around where two of the investigators, Sean and Eric, were downstairs in the cellar, and during a period of 30 to 40 seconds, they were able to register a series of events that we also captured. They got a K2 hit, and a K2 is an EMF meter. It's a meter used for measuring electromagnetic fields. They had a K2 hit, which spiked the meter. At that time, they proceeded to talk to who we thought the spirit was named George. And they asked him if he would turn the flashlight on. It's time to play with the flashlight again. Can you turn it on for us? At that time, we picked up an EVP on the recorders that said it won't, because the flashlight would not turn on, because earlier that day he had damaged it. And we had an EVP stating both on mini DV and on the voice recorders, clear as day, that said it won't. And it was not from anybody in the room at the time.
Who was this George?
Well, the research we did, we feel it was a coal miner that died either on the premises or nearby, and or possibly in the mine, because the house itself was built on top of the entrance to the mine. It was built on a hill, and right down at the bottom of the hill, they had an old mine shaft where they had dug in. That was the main entrance to the mine. And we also found during research that that mine had the highest accident and death rate out of all the mines in Ohio. So there was a possibility that's who we were dealing with, based on some of the other research we did and some of the other EVPs we captured.
That's one.
Another thing interesting to add to that. Okay, during the time that they got the EMF spike, and we've got the recorded EVP, just moments after that, Eric felt a chill that went, the room itself in the area where he was standing dropped 15 to 18 degrees. And it got so cold that Sean actually made a little joke about it, and he laughed and said, "Is it that cold?" And he said, "Yes." And they measured that difference at that time, so.
And we're going to go back to that because I want to talk about things that people should look for, such as that cold temperature. Some of the things
right, and I know we don't have a lot of time. There was many more things that occurred during that evening.
Well, if someone is throwing something at you, I think I'd pack up my stuff and just
you know
leave.
what? Actually, we were standing in the living room, and we were discussing. It was probably what I'd say 1:30 or so,
something around that.
And we were discussing our next plan of attack, where we were gonna, switch up the teams and stuff. And there was a cup that was sitting on an end table such as this, and it was off on, and it wasn't just on the edge, because we looked at our cameras and photos from earlier, and we saw it was actually toward the center of the table. But it couldn't have actually made the distance it did. Okay, we were standing on the other side of the living room, and then all of a sudden we heard a noise, and we heard boom, 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 and it rolled right over by us. And it actually probably traveled a good 10 feet. And another thing that happened, I had a flashlight ripped out of my hand that night too. I literally had it yanked out of my hand. I felt the strap and everything pull down over my hand. And
George is still probably there at the house.
Probably the family actually, they moved out. So.
Well, and we'll have to talk, and hopefully we'll have time on, if you want to get rid of a ghost, we'll have to talk about how you can do that, if there's a way to do that.
Well, it's...
maybe not, maybe you can't do it.
We can talk about it.
I don't know if you can top that story, but I'm sure you have a few of your own, Scott. Scott, what interesting, probably the story or the investigation that really jarred you the most?
Well, Massillon actually.
You were out there too.
I was in that one as well.
Yeah,
you
were
were
there
in
as
that too.
Yeah.
He can tell you some stories.
Yeah,
too.
there was one time we were in the basement.
Tell them.
It was probably about 1:30 in the morning. Actually, I think it was later than that. It was probably about 2 or 2:30 in the morning at that time. We were in the basement. It was me, Eric, another investigator of ours by the name of Jennifer, and the client was down there with us at the time. The three of us were, Jennifer, myself, and the client were all sitting in chairs on one side of the basement. Eric had just gone to the other side of the basement. He was going to the area where they'd seen the shadow pacing back and forth with a camera and was attempting to communicate with it. He was speaking out loud to it, as we do during the investigations, to see if we can get a response. And just as he's saying, George, if you're here, can you give us a sign? I was actually turning around to glance over to the other investigators, and as I did so, I saw a dark shadow suddenly drop from the ceiling directly behind Jennifer and the client. And as it hit the ground, there was this huge crash of sound. Startled the girls. They jumped up and ran across the room. He came running back into the other room. I thought something had literally fallen off the wall, because there were things that were on the wall, but I looked around, nothing had fallen whatsoever. When we started trying to reproduce the sounds, there was a metal cart that had been sitting next to us with about 40-50 pounds of metal tools on it. And when we lifted that up about an inch or so off the ground and dropped it, it was the same sound that we had heard.
It had
and we looked then later on at our cameras and pictures of that thing. It had moved. The cart had during that time. It hadn't been bumped. Nobody was sitting close enough to have bumped the cart.
It's not like someone lifted it.
Right. And we spent days analyzing that. We had photos, we had video. Unfortunately, we didn't have video pointed at the cart directly at that time.
Yeah.
We had it covering other areas of the cellar. It had manifested enough energy to move a significant amount of weight, and what he saw was a dark mass that just literally at that time dropped. And one of the theories we were tossing around was the possibility of maybe being residual and being an elevator from an old mine shaft. And possibly that, again, it's theory and speculation, but maybe something to do with that energy that existed during that period of time, or maybe something to do with the various accidents. There was some fires and explosions in this mine during that period of time of operation, which was from about I believe the mid 1800s up to about 1945 or 50 is when it finally shut down.
Oh, Robin, where do we start with you?
Just a minute.
What? And you told a story. I don't know if you want to tell the one that you just told me before we actually started taping about the little girl, but was that the one that really jarred you? Would you say that's the one, or was there something that really got you?
There's a couple, and it all revolves around kids.
Why is that, I wonder?
I don't know.
All right, what are some of the?
Yeah, maybe they'd like me.
What are some of what was the incident involving some of the children that you've seen?
It was right around when my mom died again. One of my gym teachers had recently lost his child. I had never seen the girl before in my whole life. She kept showing up, and at that age, you
At
think,
your house?
well, yeah, she would just kind of manifest herself and say, "Will you tell my dad I'm okay?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm not seeing this." And at that age, you're thinking, "Oh gosh, I'm going to be committed or something." So you don't say anything to anyone. I never mentioned it.
How did you know it was her? Did she say?
I didn't at first, but what was funny is after my sister apparently had babysat for them one time, she was very ill, and she ended up, you know, cutting out the from the newspaper, and I saw a picture of her, and it was the same little girl down to the dress she was wearing. She had a bag of cookies, a little baggie of cookies, brown curly hair, but she kept appearing to me in my closet. She showed up at school when I was trying to learn, and I just looked at the hallway, and there she was. But it was kind of mean. She wasn't as nice as she had been before. So finally,
maybe because you didn't give the message.
Well, no, and that's when I was like, all right, I gotta excuse myself. I'll be back. I went down and talked to the gym teacher. I was like, please, you know, don't send me to.
So you did
the counselor.
You did tell
I
someone.
told him, and he was at that point in tears, and he said, well, maybe she thought, you know, you would actually follow through, or. And then I never saw her again.
She may have been mad at you because you weren't giving the message to
you
her
know,
parents.
I didn't want anyone to think I was crazy.
It's so curious as to how she picked you.
Maybe the connection was through my sister. Maybe she thought I don't know.
That you were just open. Maybe you were the one that was open to this.
I don't know, but it's just the whole little kid thing. It's just not right to me that. You know.
I've got another little one for you here.
Yes.
We just did a case recently in Erie, Pennsylvania, and we had a moment that was a bit interesting. Unfortunately, we didn't capture it on audio, but it is a personal experience and not submitted as evidence, obviously. But we had a case where a 13-year-old was seeing apparitions in an attic of a woman. Occasionally, she and some of her friends were apparently lunged at from this this spirit. We did an investigation there, and probably I would say between 12 and 1 in the morning or so, we had all collected back at Tech, and Tech is basically where we set up all our equipment. We try to isolate that from other parts of the house that are being investigated. We were standing there discussing, again, a plan of attack, and right behind us in the dining room area, I heard a voice, and I had turned around and I thought it was Sean, and he was sitting behind me, and at the time he was drinking his water, taking a break, and I said, what'd you say? And he goes, oh, I didn't say anything. And I said, okay. I turned back around, and then it wasn't 3 seconds later, we heard a voice come from the room that several of us heard, you don't belong here. And it was clear as day. And we all heard, I would say we all heard it, but several of us heard it, about 3 or 4 of us heard it. And I was the one that it was closest to. And when I heard it, it sounded, I don't know if you've ever heard EVPs before. They sound a little bit gruff. They sound like they're in the background noise. This was more of a whispering, you know, like, you don't belong here, kind of like that. And it was right from behind me, and I turned around, and I was
I'm
like,
in the wrong place.
well, no, see, for us, we hear something like that, immediately the first thing I do is get up and try to go find it.
Of course you do. Of course you do. That's what separates you from the rest of the population.
We gotta figure out, you know, what it is. I mean,
yes.
I thought maybe someone was playing a joke on me at first.
Oh, yeah.
And I went into the dining room and living room and walked all around. There was no one in there.
I want to give the website for those who might be interested. Info at Munroe Falls Paranormal Society.com. We do have that email that you see on the screen. And if you have questions, or if you maybe are having an experience like that, and we'll talk about that, you can also call 330-328-1215 for more information if you're trying to get in touch with any of our guests today. Now, I guess that's the next thing. If someone is experiencing, and I'm sure you get many calls from people that have experiences, how do you decide which ones you're going to investigate? What really separates them from just a one-shot pop, or maybe someone thinks they saw something?
Well, we have a process, and the process is rather extensive. To take you through, you know, we don't want to use up all the time, but I'll try to break it down. When someone contacts us, we'll do a phone interview or several phone interviews with them to start with, and we can then weed out, you know, some possibilities at that point. We then move to the next phase. We will send out several people, myself, Rob and Jennifer, some others. Jennifer's our case manager. And we'll go out and do what we call a site survey. And during that site survey, we're going to further interview the client, interview anybody that may have been involved. We're going to talk about some of the incidences. They're going to show us around the the hot spots where they've seen this and that. We'll do some initial readings. What I mean by that is we're going to look for high levels of EMF, which can cause hallucinations and other types of biological and psychological effects in people. We're looking for any type of CO2 or any gases or anything that can cause people to maybe have effects that are similar to what some people experience with paranormal activity.
Interesting.
And that site survey usually takes a couple of hours, and we'll talk to these people and find out. And then if we make a determination, a collective determination at that point that we need to proceed, then we'll schedule the full investigation. That's the whole team, all the equipment. We'll go to the site, we'll spend a decent amount of time there. Usually it's an overnight. If we come up with anything there and we believe that it needs further attention, then we'll schedule additional investigations. And another thing we do that a lot of other people don't do is we actually have psychologists on staff. We have people like Mary Lynn that can work with children, and we also have 2 neuropsychologists that work with us to help us basically counsel people and understand some of the psychological effects that occur from the paranormal. People sometimes are very troubled by it, especially children. We had a case, or we have a case right now going on that involves small children. And
what do you mean? The spirits are children?
Yeah, no.
Oh, no.
No, the family.
The children are
They're
in the house, in the
Right.
residence.
the poltergeists?
It's not a poltergeist
No,
in this case.
it's not.
No,
Okay.
it's-
No, but we have children that are seeing apparitions. One woke up screaming a few weeks ago in a room, seeing a man standing in the corner. We've been investigating it. We've had a lot of interesting things that have occurred there. Upon our leaving, or upon us completing the first round of investigations, the client had called us a couple days later and stated that all their pictures of her and her husband were all stacked up neatly in the closet, in their pantry closet, which they have for storage closet. And that's actually where they hear things sometimes coming from that closet, which is interesting. We're trying to determine whether, it's something to do with the kids. It doesn't appear to be at this point.
Right.
We've heard footsteps the night we were there, something walking up and down the hall.
All of you are on this case?
Yeah, most of us
No,
are.
I wasn't at this particular one.
You were in this particular one?
Right.
What do you think's going on? You were in the house. What did you see?
Oh, I wasn't.
You weren't in there?
I was not there.
Okay.
Oh,
But again, it's involving children.
Right.
And it's just the children that are seeing these, correct?
No.
point it becomes-
Oh, no.
No.
Oh, no. It's much more grand than that, actually. It's 8 people total, including both parents
Wow.
and some of their friends. For example, some of their friends were over their house, okay? And again, we don't release any information about our clients, so I can't mention names.
Right.
But the female of the house had some of her friends over, and they were having coffee. And they were sitting at the kitchen table, and both of her friends saw a shadow figure come out of the living room and dart down the hallway. And one of her friends is so traumatized by seeing that she won't even come back to the house. We had experienced an interesting series of events during the investigation, including a cold spot that traveled between the dining room and the kitchen and down toward the family room, and we were able to place EMF detectors at various points, and we were able to get interaction where one would go off, you would feel a cold spot, the other one would go off, and it seemed to travel.
Wow.
Yeah, very, very interesting. And that's an ongoing case right now because they still have activity occurring. Like I said, the pictures, which were all set up on an old piano that dates back to the early 1900s. They have it sitting in their living room. They had all their pictures up on this piano, and it was mainly the pictures of her and her husband. 2 days after the investigation, she called. She says, I got to tell you something. She basically works nights, and she came home in the morning. Her husband was there, and when she opened the closet to get some cereal out of the closet, she found all the pictures stacked up from large to small in the closet floor. And
but you can't stress enough that anything with kids, they're out there.
And that's exactly what we're trying to
priority.
determine.
If there's kids involved,
Yeah, they get bumped to the top of the
They're
list.
Absolutely.
terrifying those children.
Right,
Absolutely.
and this case actually came to the forefront because we do bump any if there's kids involved. Other cases that are less priority get bumped back, and they go to the forefront.
Right.
absolutely.
Because this little girl, the way her mother described the scream, she thought for the first time in her life someone was in her room actually injuring her child.
Yeah.
And that's how bad it was. And we had some very interesting experiences during the investigation. One of them was, again, a personal experience, and it kind of set me back a little bit because I've never had this happen before. But during the investigation, I was sitting with one of the other investigators, and we were what we call on observation at that time. It's a smaller house, so we can't conduct simultaneous EVP sessions, so we have to split those up a little bit, where you have one team doing them, the other team doing observation in another area, and that's basically with audio, video, and such in case something's documented outside that area, and it's usually in pairs. Well, we were sitting on observation, and I had set my head back for a moment, and I closed my eyes briefly, and I saw the face of a man appear in front of me, and it was very, very vivid, and it jolted me a little bit, and I remembered it very, very well.
Who was
because
the face? Because we're almost out of time.
the face was a relative.
We're out of time. We must have all three of you back. Again, if you want information, info@MunroeFallsParanormalSociety.com. What a great show. I want to thank my guests today,
Sure.
Eric Haney, Scott Wells, and Robin Vaughn. And I want you back on the show. What can I say? We haven't even found out how to get rid of the ghosts.
Well,
We never even got to that point. We're out of time.
Okay.
But I want to have all three of you back on the show. And again, my name is Joyce Johnson, and thank you for joining us on Family Focus.